You're standing on the new shore, the crunch of pebbles under your boots mingling with the sea's soft sigh, a thread tying you back to the longships, raids and starlit voyages you've traveled. The woman who led you to this uncharted land is directing her crew to unload supplies, her voice steady as the matriarchs you saw in smoky longhouses. You're not just witnessing exploration now, you're reflecting on the legacy of Viking women, their mark etched in every wave they crossed, every market they mastered, every saga they spun. The wind carries the scent of pine and salt, and you feel the weight of their world, where women didn't just sail but shaped history's tides. This is their story's crescendo, and you're here to see how it echoes. Mainstream history confirms that Viking women's influence stretched far beyond their shores, with figures like Gudrid leaving traces in sagas and settlements from Iceland to Vinland, their roles as sailors, traders, and leaders reshaping medieval narratives. You're watching the woman, her cloak dusted with sand, mark out a spot for a new longhouse, her decisions as deliberate as the Volvish chants you heard in the grove. She's not just building a home, she's planting a legacy, her hands as sure as those that carved dragon prows or weighed silver in the market. You try to imagine her future, but the horizon's too vast, like the seas she conquered. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women wore brooches shaped like tiny ships, a nod to their maritime prowess, pinned proudly to their cloaks. Imagine you're holding one, its metal cool and intricate, a miniature of the longship you sailed. Historians still argue whether women's contributions were the backbone of Viking expansion or overshadowed by men's deeds. Did they drive the Viking Age's reach, or were they vital but secondary? The debate's open, but artifacts like those ship brooches and saga accounts of women like Eud suggest their influence was as wide as the oceans they crossed. You wander the shore, watching the crew raise a tent, their movements echoing the shipyard's rhythm you saw long ago. A joke flickers. Why did Viking women wear ship brooches? To remind everyone they ruled the waves and the wardrobe. You grin, but the truth is heavier. Their legacy wasn't just in voyages but in the lives they built, from villages to Vinland. You recall the seal blubber bomb from Winter, another clever trick like these brooches showing how women wove practicality into power. Another quip, Viking women didn't need statues. Their ships were their monuments. Their story feels alive, carved in every plank, every saga, every choice. As you linger, the woman kneels, tracing a rune in the sand, her face calm but fierce. You see her crew, women and men, working as one, their trust in her as deep as the faith in those raven charms or henbane visions. You're starting to feel their legacy not just in history books but in the air, the sea, the earth beneath you. They were navigators, warriors, traders, storytellers, seers, women who turned the raw chaos of their world into something enduring. The horizon glows and you sense their strength, a tide that still pulls at the edges of time. The light softens now, the sea's murmur growing quieter, like a lullaby settling over the shore. You feel your shoulders relax, the weight of their world easing as the waves lap gently, each one a whisper of their story. The sky stretches wide, stars peeking through, the same ones those navigators read, guiding you back to a calm, quiet place. Their legacy isn't loud, it's deep, like the roots of the pines behind you, steady and strong. You're sinking into the rhythm of the tide, the wind's soft hum, the warmth of a fire you imagine flickering nearby. Let the day slip away, like sand through your fingers, and rest in the glow of their courage. Their ships still sail in your dreams, carrying you to a place of peace. Sleep now, wrapped in their story, and let the sea sing you to rest. You step off the cliff's edge now, your boots crunching on the gravelly path leading to a Viking coastal village, where the air smells of salt, smoke, and drying fish. The sea's roar lingers in your ears, a reminder of those women commanding longships, their silhouettes still vivid in your mind. This village, nestled between jagged rocks and wind-bent pines, is where those seafaring women return, where their lives unfold when the sails are furled. You're weaving through a cluster of longhouses, their turf roofs blending into the hillside like sleeping giants. Smoke curls from chimneys, and you hear the clatter of looms and the laughter of children. Viking women weren't just queens of the sea, they ruled these shores too, their hands shaping the rhythm of daily life. Mainstream history notes that Viking women, unlike many in medieval Europe, had significant autonomy, often managing farms and finances while men were off raiding. Laws from the period, like those in the Gragas texts, granted them rights to inherit and own property, a power that feels almost modern. You're standing in the doorway of a longhouse, the warmth of a central fire washing over you. A woman, her hair braided tightly, stirs a pot of barley stew while tallying tradable goods, wool, amber, furs, on a notched stick. She's not just cooking, she's running the show, her voice firm as she directs a young girl to feed the goats. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women used urine to dye their wool, soaking it in vats to set bright colors like red and blue. Imagine the smell, sharp and pungent, as you pass a dye pit where a woman stirs the steaming liquid with a stick, her face scrunched but focused. It's gross, sure, but it's also genius. Urine's ammonia fixed the dye, making their cloaks the envy of traders. Historians still argue whether these women were the economic backbone of Viking society or just vital cogs. Did their control of household wealth give them equal footing with men, or was it a quieter power, felt but not flaunted? The debate's alive, but the evidence, those notched sticks, those property laws, leans toward women as linchpins. You wander past a loom where another woman weaves, her fingers flying over threads as colorful as a sunset. The cloth she's making could end up in a distant market, traded for silver or spices. You can't help but smirk. Viking women probably invented multitasking, cooking, weaving, trading, all while keeping the kids from wrestling in the fire pit. The village hums with their energy, every task a thread in the community's fabric. You notice a girl carving a wooden spoon, her focus intense, mimicking the women around her. It's clear this place thrives because of them, their hands as steady on land as they were on those wave-tossed ships you saw earlier. Outside, you spot a woman salting fish on a rack, her hands slick but sure. The wind carries a chill, and you pull your imaginary cloak tighter, wishing you had one of those urine-dyed masterpieces. Another joke pops up. Why did Viking women die with urine? Because eau de cod wasn't a scent yet. You grin, but the truth hits harder. These women turned scraps and stench into wealth, their ingenuity as sharp as any sword. You linger by the fish racks, watching the village pulse with life, each woman a cog in a machine that doesn't just survive but thrives. As you move toward the shore, you see a group repairing nets, their chatter mixing with the gulls' cries. They're planning the next voyage, their voices as confident as those you heard shouting orders at sea. You realize their work here, managing, crafting, trading, isn't separate from the seafaring life, it's the foundation. Without this village, those longships wouldn't sail. You feel the weight of their world, the balance of grit and grace, and it's humbling. Like that whalebone ironing board you chuckled about, these women are practical yet fierce, their legacy woven into every thread and fishbone. You leave the village behind, the scent of smoked fish fading as you trek toward a grassy clearing where the air buzzes with the clatter of wood on wood. You're standing on the edge of a training ground where Viking women, shield maidens, hone their skills, their movements sharp despite the weight of shields and axes. The sea's distant roar feels like a heartbeat, tying this moment to those longships you saw slicing through waves. These women aren't just preparing for battle. They're defying anyone who thinks the sea is their only domain. You feel the ground vibrate as two shield maidens spar, their laughter cutting through the grunts of effort, proving strength and spirit go hand in hand. Mainstream history confirms shield maidens existed, with archaeological finds like the Birka grave, containing a woman buried with weapons including a sword and arrows, suggesting they fought alongside men. You're watching a woman, her hair tied back with a leather thong, swing an axe with precision that makes your arms ache just looking. She's not just muscle. Her eyes track her opponent's every twitch, reading moves like those sailors read the stars. You try to mimic her stance, but your imaginary shield feels like lugging a table, and you're quietly glad no one's swinging at you. Here's the quirky bit. Some shield maidens wore iron rings woven into their braids, both as decoration and to make a headbutt sting like a hornet. Picture it, you're facing a warrior woman and her braids jingle with metal, daring you to get close. It's intimidating and, honestly, kind of fabulous. Historians still argue whether shield maidens were common or exceptional. Were they a regular part of Viking armies, or were they rare figures, their stories amplified by saga poets? The debate's open, but graves like Birka's and saga mentions of women like Lager the lean toward them being more than myth. You step closer, the grass damp under your boots, and watch a young woman learning to block with a shield. Her instructor, a grizzled shield maiden with a scar across her cheek, barks corrections but flashes a grin when the girl gets it right. You can't help but smirk. Viking training's like CrossFit, but with higher stakes and worse helmets. The women move in pairs, practicing thrusts and parries, their wooden swords cracking like thunder. You notice their shields, painted with runes or simple patterns, aren't just tools but extensions of their will, each dent a story of survival. You're drawn to a group practicing archery, their arrows thudding into straw targets with a satisfying thwack. One woman, her fingers wrapped in cloth to guard against the bowstring's bite, looses an arrow that splits another in half. You whistle under your breath, wondering if Robin Hood stole his tricks from these ladies. Another joke: why did the shield maiden wear iron braids? Because a bad hair day could knock you out. You chuckle, but the reality sinks in. These women trained to protect their villages, their ships, their lives. No wonder they were feared. As you wander the grounds, you see a shield maiden teaching a girl to wield a dagger, her voice calm but firm, like a mother teaching a child to knead bread. It's a reminder of that village you left, where women juggled looms and ledgers. Here they juggle weapons and courage, their skills as vital as those urine-dyed cloaks you laughed about. You feel the weight of their world. Every swing, every block, is a defiance of a life that demanded they be everything. The training ground hums with their energy, and you're starting to understand why their legend cuts as deep as their axes. You're no longer in the sparring clearing, now you're knee-deep in sawdust and sea air, standing in a bustling shipyard where the skeleton of a longship rises like a giant's ribcage. The clatter of hammers and the tang of pine resin fill the air, tying you back to those women steering through storms you saw earlier. Here, Viking women aren't just sailors or warriors, they're builders, their hands shaping the very vessels that conquer the seas. You feel the rough grain of timber under your palms as you imagine helping hoist a plank, your muscles burning under the weight. This is where the Viking world's pulse beats loudest, in the crafting of ships that defy the ocean's wrath. Mainstream history highlights that Viking longships, like those found in the Oseberg burial, were engineering marvels, with clinker-built hulls that flexed with the waves, some crafted under women's supervision. You're watching a woman, her apron dusted with wood shavings, carve a dragon's head for the prow, her chisel steady as she etches scales that'll snarl at the horizon. She's not just an artisan, she's a strategist, ensuring every plank fits tight enough to keep the sea out. You try to lift a mallet, but it's heavier than it looks, and you're secretly relieved when no one calls you to swing it. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some shipbuilders used horse fat to waterproof the hulls, smearing it on like medieval sunscreen, sticky, smelly, but effective. Imagine you're slathering it on, the scent clinging to your hands as you grimace, yet marvel at how it seals the wood against leaks. Historians still argue whether women were primary shipwrights or assistants in these yards. Did they lead the construction, or were they skilled laborers under male direction? The debate's open, but finds like the Oseberg ship, buried with a high-status woman, suggest they held sway in these sacred builds. You move along the ship's frame, where women and men work side by side, fitting planks with a precision that feels like weaving, each piece overlapping like threads in those vibrant cloaks you saw in the village. A joke bubbles up: why did the Viking woman build ships? So she could sail away from bad dates. You smirk, but the truth is heavier. These ships were lifelines carrying warriors, traders, and dreams across oceans. You watch a woman test a rope's strength, her hands tugging with the same confidence you saw in the shield maiden's swings. The longship's nearly complete, its curves sleek as a seal's back. You run your fingers along a plank, feeling the grain smoothed by careful hands. Another woman kneads pitch into seams, her fingers black but deft, sealing gaps like she's stitching the sea itself. You recall that whalebone ironing board from the village? Another quirky tool like this horse fat, showing how Viking women turned the odd into the essential. You chuckle again: horse fat and urine dye? Vikings were the original upcyclers. But it's their ingenuity that hits you. Every smear of fat, every carved rune, is a step toward survival. As you step back, the ship looms larger, ready to kiss the waves. You see a woman climb the mast, testing its balance, her silhouette bold against the gray sky. She's not just building a boat, she's crafting a legacy, one that'll carry her sisters to distant shores. The shipyard's din, hammers, shouts, the sea's distant growl, feels like a song, and these women are its composers. You're starting to grasp why their ships weren't just vessels but symbols, built with the same grit that fueled those shield maiden strikes and those village women's trades. You're standing on the deck of a newly built longship, the wood still smelling of fresh pitch and pine, as you gaze at a night sky so clear it feels like you could scoop the stars into your hands. The ship bobs gently in the harbor, its dragon prow nodding to the horizon, tying you back to the shipyard's clamor and the women who carved this vessel. Now you're learning how Viking women navigated these seas, not with maps but with the heavens as their guide. The air is crisp, stinging your nose, and you feel the weight of the open sea ahead, where one wrong turn could mean a watery end. These women, though, they read the stars like you read a text message. Fast, sure, and with zero room for error. Mainstream history tells us Vikings used celestial navigation, with tools like the sun compass and possibly sunstones to find their way, and women like Astrid, mentioned in sagas, were known to guide ships. You're watching a woman, her cloak pinned with a bronze brooch, hold a wooden disc with a central pin, tracking the sun's shadow to set the course. Her eyes flick between the horizon and the stars, naming constellations you've never heard of, Viking names like the Wagon for the Big Dipper. You try to follow her gaze, but the sky's a dizzying map, and you're glad she's in charge. Here's the quirky bit. Some navigators supposedly used ravens to find land, releasing them and following their flight. Imagine a Viking GPS with feathers. Picture you're holding a squawking raven, its beady eyes judging you as you set it free, hoping it doesn't just circle back for your lunch. Historians still argue whether women were primary navigators or learned these skills as backup. Were they the ones plotting routes to Iceland or just assisting? The debate's open, but saga references and the presence of navigational tools in women's graves suggest they held the helm, literally and figuratively. You lean against the ship's rail, the wood cool under your palms, as the woman points to a star low on the horizon. She's teaching a younger girl, her voice soft but firm, explaining how to measure angles with a notched stick. You feel like you're eavesdropping on a secret, one passed down through chilly nights like this. A joke pops up. Why did the Viking woman trust the stars? Because they never ghosted her like a bad Tinder match. You grin, but the truth is sobering. These women navigated storms and fog with nothing but skill and nerve, their minds as sharp as the axes you saw in the training ground. The ship sways as a breeze kicks up, and you watch the crew adjust the sail, their movements practiced, almost musical. The navigator mutters about wind patterns, her fingers tracing invisible lines in the air. You recall the horse-fat-smeared hulls from the shipyard, another clever trick like those ravens showing how Vikings turned nature into tools. You chuckle. Ravens, sunstones, urine dye, Viking women were basically MacGyver with better hair. But it's their precision that humbles you, each star a waypoint in a world without roads. As the night deepens, the navigator's voice slows, her words blending with the lap of waves. You're starting to feel the rhythm of the sea, the same rhythm those village women wove into their looms and the shield maidens beat into their shields. Navigation wasn't just a skill, it was a lifeline tying every voyage to home. You look up, the stars brighter now, and wonder how anyone could find their way in this vastness. But these women did, their eyes on the sky, their hands on the tiller, guiding you and history through the dark. You're crouched low on the deck of a longship, the sky bruising purple as dawn creeps over the horizon, painting the waves with streaks of gold. The air is sharp with salt, and your heart thumps as you join a Viking raid, the oars dipping in rhythm like a war drum. You're surrounded by women, their faces set, eyes gleaming with focus, gripping shields and swords as the shore of a foreign village comes into view. This is the flip side of those starlit voyages you witnessed, where the skills of navigation and shipbuilding meet the raw edge of survival. You're not just sailing now, you're storming, and these women are leading the charge, their courage is fierce as the dragon prow slicing through the mist. Mainstream history records Viking raids as swift, brutal affairs, with women like those in the sagas, such as Freydis Eriksdottir, joining or even leading attacks, their presence noted in tales of conquests across England and beyond. You're watching a woman, her cloak flapping like a raven's wings, shout orders as the ship glides toward a cluster of thatched roofs. Her sword catches the dawn's light, and you feel the deck shudder as oars are stowed, the crew ready to leap ashore. You grip an imaginary shield, hoping you look half as fierce, though your knees wobble at the thought of what's coming. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Viking women carried small, carved amulets of Thor's hammer, tucked into their belts for luck during raids. Picture you're clutching one, its tiny weight oddly comforting as you brace for the chaos. Historians still argue whether women were regular raiders or exceptional cases. Did they fight as often as men, or were their roles exaggerated by saga writers hungry for drama? The debate's open, but graves with weapons and saga accounts of women like Freydis, who reportedly scared off enemies by baring her chest, suggest they weren't just bystanders. The ship scrapes sand and you're jostled as the crew surges forward, shields raised, their boots splashing in shallow waves. You follow, heart pounding, as the woman leading the raid moves like a wolf, silent but deadly. The village ahead is waking, smoke curling from chimneys, and you hear a distant shout, "Too late." A joke flickers. Why did the Viking woman raid? To grab the best loot before the men hogged it. You smirk, but the reality's heavier. These raids were about survival, securing wealth to fuel those villages you saw, where women dyed wool and managed farms. You're running now, the ground soft underfoot as the raiders fan out. The leader's voice cuts through, directing her crew to target grain stores, not homes. It's strategic, not mindless. Vikings didn't just pillage, they planned. You recall the sunstone navigation, the horse-fat hulls, even those iron braid headbutts from the training ground. Everything connects. These women are as calculated in battle as they were at sea or in the shipyard. Another quip. Viking women didn't need battle plans. They had better instincts than a seagull sniffing fish. But it's their precision that strikes you, each move honed like the chisels that carved that dragon prow. As you duck behind a haystack watching the raid unfold, you see a woman barter with a trembling villager, trading safety for a sack of silver. It's not all swords. Some of this is negotiation, a skill you'll see again in the markets. The amulet in your hand feels warmer, or maybe that's just your nerves. You're starting to get why these women were feared, not just for their blades but for their minds, sharp as the waves that carried them here. The raid's over fast, the crew retreating to the ship, loot in tow, leaving you breathless and awed by their ruthless grace. You're back on land now, the raid's adrenaline still buzzing in your veins as you step into a bustling Viking market, where the air hums with shouts, laughter, and the clink of silver. The sea's salt still clings to your cloak, a faint echo of those longships and the women who stormed ashore with you. Here, in this chaotic sprawl of stalls, Viking women aren't wielding swords or stars but something just as powerful: trade. You weave through crowds, dodging carts piled with furs and barrels of dried cod, as women barter with the confidence of shield maidens, their voices sharp over the market's din. This is their domain, where goods from distant shores swap hands, and you're about to see how these women turned commerce into conquest. Mainstream history notes that Viking women were key players in trade networks, managing goods like amber, walrus ivory, and woolen cloth that reached markets as far as Byzantium. You're standing by a stall where a woman, her fingers stained with dye from that urine-soaked wool you chuckled about, haggles over a stack of pelts with a trader from across the sea. Her eyes are sharp, calculating value faster than you can count your pocket change. She's not just selling, she's commanding the deal, her words as precise as the oar strokes you saw on that longship. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women use tiny bronze scales balanced with whalebone to weigh silver, hack silver, bits of chopped up jewelry used as currency. Imagine you're holding one, its delicate arm tipping as you drop a silver chunk, feeling like a Viking accountant. Historians still argue whether women dominated trade or were secondary to men's networks. Were they the masterminds of Viking commerce, or did they just manage local exchanges? The debate's open, but archaeological finds of scales and weights in women's graves suggest they held serious economic clout. You move through the market, the ground muddy under your boots, and watch a woman trade a bolt of bright blue cloth for a sack of Frankish glass beads. Her smile is sly, like she knows she got the better deal. You can't help but grin. Viking women could probably out-haggle a modern car salesman. The market's alive with their energy, women weighing silver, inspecting furs, even selling those horse-fat sealed barrels from the shipyard. It's a reminder of the village you walked through, where women ran households with the same fierce precision. Another joke. Why did the Viking woman love markets? Because she could trade a bad deal for a better saga. You pause by a stall selling bone combs, each carved with tiny runes, and overhear a woman negotiating for spices. Saffron, a luxury worth more than gold. She's not just buying, she's planning, maybe for a feast to impress a chieftain or seal an alliance. You recall the Thor's hammer amulets from the raid, another small but mighty tool like these scales, showing how women turn the everyday into power. You chuckle again. Viking women didn't need Black Friday, they invented the art of the deal. But it's their savvy that hits you. Every transaction is a thread in the web of Viking wealth, spun by hands as steady as those that steered ships or swung axes. As you wander, you see a young girl learning to weigh silver, her mother guiding her with a patient nod. The market's chaos feels ordered, each deal a step in a larger dance. These women aren't just trading goods, They're trading futures, ensuring their families, their villages, thrive. You feel the weight of their world, where a good bargain was as vital as a good raid. The market's hum fades as you linger, watching the women work, their voices weaving a legacy as enduring as the longships that brought them here. You've left the market's clamor behind, your boots now crunching on a path toward a longhouse glowing with firelight, where the air hums with whispered tales and the scent of burning pine. The sea's distant roar ties you back to those longships, their dragon prows still vivid from your raid and market adventures. Tonight, you're diving into the world of Viking myths, where women like Valkyries, half legend, half truth, dance between history and story. You settle by the hearth, the warmth soaking into your bones as a woman with silver-streaked hair begins a saga, her voice weaving images of warrior spirits choosing the slain. You're not just listening, you're unraveling the truth behind these mythical women who haunted Viking dreams. Mainstream history confirms Valkyries were a cornerstone of Norse mythology, depicted in texts like the Poetic Edda as divine women who selected warriors for Valhalla, sometimes linked to real shield maidens like those you saw training. You're watching the storyteller's hands trace shapes in the air, conjuring a Valkyrie on a winged horse, her spear glinting like the stars you navigated by. You lean closer, the fire's crackle blending with her words, feeling the weight of a myth that shaped how Vikings saw their women, fierce, otherworldly, yet grounded in the grit you've witnessed. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Viking women wore owl feather amulets, believing they channeled the wisdom of Valkyries, who were sometimes linked to owls in folklore. Picture your fingering one, its soft feathers tickling your palm, a talisman tying you to those celestial choosers of fate. Historians still argue whether Valkyries were purely mythical or inspired by real warrior women. Did sagas exaggerate shield maidens into goddesses, or were Valkyries a way to honor women's battlefield roles? The debate's open, but artifacts like owl-shaped pendants and saga references suggest a blurry line between legend and life. You shift on the bench, the longhouse's smoky air making your eyes water, as the storyteller describes a Valkyrie named Brynhild, her defiance echoing the women you saw raiding. You smirk. Valkyries were like Viking HR, deciding who got the Valhalla promotion. But the truth cuts deeper. These myths gave women a divine aura, elevating their real-world roles as sailors, traders, and fighters. You recall the iron braid headbutts from the training ground, another fierce detail like these owl feathers, showing how women wove strength into every part of their lives. The fire pops, and you notice a girl listening wide-eyed, clutching a carved owl pendant. The storyteller's voice dips, painting a Valkyrie guiding a fallen warrior to Odin's hall, her wings cutting through a stormy sky. You feel the pull of the tale, its rhythm like the oars you heard on that longship. Another joke. Why did the Valkyrie ride a winged horse? Because Ubers don't deliver to Valhalla. You grin, but the saga's power lingers. These stories weren't just entertainment. They were a mirror reflecting women who commanded respect on earth and in myth. As the tale winds down, you glance at the women around the fire. Some young, some weathered, all wrapped. They're the real Valkyries. You think their lives as epic as the legends. You recall the market women's savvy, the shield maiden's strikes, the navigator's starlit precision. These myths didn't just glorify, they immortalized. You lean back, the longhouse's warmth lulling you, and realize these stories were as vital as the ships you saw built, carrying Viking women's legacy across time, not just seas. The fire dims, but the saga's glow lingers, urging you to listen closer to the whispers of the past. You step out of the longhouse, the saga's echoes fading as you breathe in the cool night air, heavy with the scent of damp earth and distant sea. The village around you is quiet, save for the soft cluck of chickens and the creak of a gate, tying you back to the market's bustle and the fire-lit Valkyrie tales. Now you're slipping into the heart of a Viking household, where women wield power not with swords or sails but with the subtle strength of family ties. You're standing in a longhouse's doorway, the glow of a hearth casting shadows on woven hangings, as a matriarch directs her kin with a voice that could calm a storm or start one. This is where Viking women shaped their world, one decision, one bond at a time. Mainstream history shows Viking women, especially high-status ones, held significant influence within families, often acting as matriarchs who managed alliances through marriage or inheritance, as seen in sagas like the Laxdæla saga. You're watching a woman, her silver brooch glinting, settle a dispute between her sons over land, her words sharp but fair, like the axe swings you saw in the training ground. She's not just a mother, she's a strategist, her authority as firm as the navigators you saw steering by stars. You try to keep up, but her quick decisions make your head spin like trying to track a ship in a squall. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some Viking women used carved bone pins not just to fasten cloaks but to signal their status, with intricate designs showing their family's wealth. Imagine you're holding one, its tiny runes cool against your fingers, a badge of power as bold as those Thor's hammer amulets from the raid. Historians still argue whether these matriarchs held equal power to male chieftains or wielded influence behind closed doors. Were they the true rulers of Viking clans, or was their authority limited to the hearth? The debate's open, but saga accounts and grave goods, like those ornate pins, suggest women were central to family power. You move deeper into the longhouse, the air thick with the smell of wool and stew, as the matriarch assigns tasks: spinning, milking, settling debts. Her daughter-in-law weaves nearby, her loom clicking like the oars you heard at sea, while a young girl mimics her mother's commanding tone, bossing a wooden doll. You smirk. Viking women probably invented the power nap, running households between raids and trade deals. The matriarch's gaze lands on you and you straighten, feeling like you've been caught slacking. Her authority reminds you of the market women's savvy, bargaining with the same precision she uses to manage her kin. The fire crackles as she negotiates a marriage for her daughter, her words weaving alliances stronger than any ship's rope. You recall the owl feather amulets from the Valkyrie tales, another symbol of women's layered roles, mythic, practical, powerful. Another joke: why did the Viking matriarch rule the house? Because even Odin knew better than to cross her. You grin, but the truth is heavier. These women held families together, their decisions rippling to the raids, markets, and voyages you've seen. Every choice, like every plank in that longship, was placed with care. You linger by the hearth, watching the matriarch teach her granddaughter to carve a bone pin, her hands steady despite years of work. The longhouse feels alive, its walls holding stories of births, feuds, and feasts, all shaped by women like her. You're starting to see how their power wasn't loud like a raid but deep, like the sea itself, carrying their families forward. The fire's warmth pulls you in, and you realize these women were the anchors, tying the Viking world together, from the village you walked to the stars you sailed by. You're still in the longhouse's glow, but now you're drawn to the flicker of a fire where shadows dance on the walls, and the air carries the weight of stories yet untold. The matriarch's voice from the last scene lingers, her authority echoing like the sea's call you heard on that longship. Tonight, you're sinking into the heart of Viking storytelling, where women take center stage, not just as listeners but as saga weavers, their words spinning tales that rival the Valkyries' myths. You settle on a bench, the wood worn smooth by generations, as a woman with a voice like a low tide begins reciting a saga, her eyes glinting with the fire's reflection. You're not just hearing a story, you're living it, wrapped in the rhythm of her words. Mainstream history confirms that Viking women were often storytellers, preserving oral traditions and sagas like those of the Icelanders, which recount family histories and heroic deeds, sometimes with women as central figures. You're watching this woman, her hands gesturing like she's pulling threads from the air, narrate the tale of Aud the Deep-Minded, a matriarch who led her kin to Iceland. Her voice rises and falls, painting Aud's journey across seas you've sailed in your mind, her leadership as steady as the navigators you saw under starlight. You lean forward, caught in the spell, your breath sinking with the story's pulse. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some storytellers used rune-carved sticks, twirling them to mark key moments in the tale, like a Viking version of a conductor's baton. Imagine you're holding one, its carvings rough under your thumb, feeling like you're part of the saga's rhythm. Historians still argue whether women were the primary keepers of oral tradition or shared the role with men. Were they the main saga weavers or did they mostly pass down family tales? The debate's open, but sagas like Aud's and archaeological finds of rune sticks in women's graves suggest they were vital to this art. You glance around the longhouse where others, men, women, children, hang on the storyteller's words, their faces lit by the fire's glow. She describes Aud's ship battling a storm, her crew trusting her as you trusted those shield maidens in the raid. You smirk. Viking storytellers could probably outsell a modern audiobook narrator. The tale shifts to Aud's wisdom, her decisions shaping a new settlement, much like the matriarch you saw managing her household. Another joke. Why did the Viking woman tell sagas? To keep everyone awake until the mead ran out. You grin, but the truth is heavier. These stories were history, law, and identity woven by women's voices. The storyteller pauses, twirling her rune stick, and you feel the weight of her words, each one a thread connecting the raids, markets, and family ties you've seen. You recall the owl feather amulets from the Valkyrie tales, another layer of story like these rune sticks, showing how women crafted meaning from the everyday. You chuckle again, rune sticks and urine dye? Viking women were the ultimate multitaskers. But it's their power to preserve that hits you. Sagas weren't just tales. They were lifelines carrying lessons across generations as vital as the longships you saw built. As the saga winds on, you notice a young girl mimicking the storyteller, practicing her gestures with a stick of her own. The fire crackles, its warmth pulling you deeper into the tale, where Aud's legacy feels alive, her strength echoing the women you've met, from shipwrights to traders. You're starting to see how these stories weren't just entertainment. They were a mirror reflecting women who shaped the Viking world with every choice, every word. The longhouse feels smaller now, the saga's rhythm lulling you, tying you to the sea, the stars, and the women whose voices still echo through time. You step outside the longhouse, the saga's cadence still humming in your ears as a biting wind slaps your face, carrying the faint tang of salt from the sea you sailed. The village is hushed, blanketed in snow, and you're pulling your cloak tight, the same kind those market women dyed with that pungent urine you laughed about. Now you're facing the brutal Nordic winter, where Viking women didn't just endure but thrived, their resilience as fierce as the shield maiden strikes you witnessed. You trudge through the snow, your boots sinking, toward a cluster of longhouses where women stoke fires and mend roofs against the cold's relentless grip. This is their battleground, not of swords or sails, but of survival, where every choice keeps the community alive. Mainstream history notes that Viking women were pivotal in winter survival, managing scarce resources like food and fuel, with archaeological evidence of storage pits and preserved fish found in settlements like Birka. You're watching a woman, her hands chapped from cold, layer straw over a roof to trap heat, her breath clouding as she checks a pit of salted cod, stockpiled from that market you visited. She's not just preparing, she's strategizing, ensuring her family outlasts the frost. You try to help shovel snow, but your fingers numb fast, and you're quietly glad she's leading this fight. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women use seal blubber not just for lamp oil but as a skin balm to protect against frostbite, smearing it like Viking Vaseline. Imagine you're rubbing it on, the greasy feel oddly soothing as you grimace at the fishy smell. Historians still argue whether women were the primary winter managers or shared duties equally with men. Did they oversee survival strategies, or were they just executing plans? The debate's open, but finds of tools like bone needles and storage jars in women's graves suggest they were the backbone of winter endurance. You duck into a longhouse, the warmth of a peat fire hitting you like a hug. The woman's directing her kin to repair a loom, her voice steady despite the howling wind outside. You recall the saga of Aud, her leadership echoing this woman's quiet command. A joke bubbles up. Why did Viking women love winter? Because they could freeze out bad house guests. You smirk, but the truth is heavier. These women turned scarcity into sufficiency, their ingenuity as vital as the horse-fat hulls you saw in the shipyard. You watch her ration barley, her calculations as precise as the navigator's star charts. The longhouse is a hive of activity. Women sewing furs, children stacking firewood, every task a defense against the cold. You notice a girl rubbing seal blubber on her hands, mimicking her mother, and you think of those bone pins from the matriarch's house, another small tool of survival. Another quip, seal blubber and whalebone boards? Viking women were the original skincare influencers. But it's their grit that strikes you. Winter was a test, and they passed it, keeping fires lit and bellies full when the world outside was a frozen beast. As you huddle closer to the fire, you see the woman check a trapline's haul. Rabbit pelts for warmth, meat for stew. Her movements are deliberate, like the storyteller's rune sticks, weaving survival into every act. You're starting to feel the weight of their winters, where every spark, every stitch was a victory. The sea's distant roar, the raids, the markets, all tie back to this, to women who held the line against nature's worst. The fire's glow softens, and you're lulled by their quiet strength, wondering how they made the impossible feel routine. You're still wrapped in the longhouse's warmth, but now you're stepping out into the village, where the snow crunches underfoot and the air bites like a blade, tying you back to the winter's harsh lessons and the women who mastered them. The sea's faint growl hums in the distance, a reminder of the longships you sailed and the raids you survived. Today you're diving into the political heart of Viking society, where women didn't just manage households but shaped tribal decisions, their voices carrying weight in smoky halls. You're trailing a woman, her cloak edged with fur, as she strides toward a chieftain's longhouse, her steps as sure as the navigators you saw under starlight. This is power, not shouted but spoken, and you're about to see how Viking women bent the course of their world. Mainstream history confirms that Viking women, particularly high-status ones, influenced politics, with figures like Queen Gunhild in sagas advising or even manipulating chieftains, their roles backed by laws allowing women to inherit leadership titles. You're watching this woman, her brooch gleaming like the bone pins you admired, address a gathering of warriors and elders. Her voice cuts through the murmurs, proposing an alliance with a neighboring clan, her words as calculated as the market deals you witnessed. You try to stand taller, but her presence makes you feel like a kid at a grown-up table, awed by her command. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women carried small amber charms shaped like ravens, believed to sharpen their wit during negotiations, like a Viking lucky charm for debates. Imagine you're clutching one, its smooth surface warm in your palm, hoping it'll help you keep up with her sharp arguments. Historians still argue whether women held formal political power or wielded influence informally. Were they true leaders or did they shape decisions through persuasion? The debate's open, but saga accounts and grave finds of high-status women with diplomatic gifts, like silver hoards, suggest they were political players. You slip into the longhouse, the air thick with mead and tension, as the woman counters a warrior's objection, her logic tighter than the ship planks you saw crafted. You recall the saga weaver's rune stick, another tool of influence like these raven charms, showing how women wove power into every gesture. A joke pops up. Why did the Viking woman excel in politics? Because she could outtalk a storm. You grin, but the truth is heavier. Her words are forging peace or maybe war with the same precision as the shield maiden strikes you saw in training. The firelight dances on her face as she offers a compromise, her tone calm but unyielding, like the matriarch settling family disputes. You notice a younger woman watching, learning, her eyes tracking every move. A future leader, maybe like the girl with the rune stick in the storytelling circle. Another quip. Viking women didn't need a ballot box. Their voices were their vote. But it's their strategy that hits you. Every alliance, every argument was a thread in the Viking tapestry, as vital as the wool those market women dyed or the ships that carried raiders. As the meeting ends, the woman seals the deal with a nod, her raven charm glinting as she adjusts her cloak. You feel the weight of her world, where a single word could shift a tribe's fate, much like a star's position guided a ship. You're starting to see how these women didn't just survive. They steered, their influence rippling from the longhouse to the sea. The hall quiets, and you linger, caught in the echo of her voice, wondering how many battles she's won without lifting a sword, her power as deep as the winter snow outside. You're leaving the chieftain's longhouse, the echo of that woman's commanding voice still ringing as you step into a twilight world where the air hums with a different kind of power, spiritual, mystic, almost electric. The sea's distant pulse ties you back to the voyages, raids and markets, but now you're drawn to a secluded grove, where pine needles carpet the ground and a faint chant weaves through the dusk. Viking women, you're learning, weren't just sailors, traders or leaders. They were seers wielding the unseen forces of fate. You follow a woman, her cloak adorned with owl feathers like those Valkyrie amulets you touched, as she prepares a ritual, her movements slow but deliberate, like the navigators plotting a course by stars. This is their sacred space, where the veil between worlds thins, and you're about to witness their spiritual might. Mainstream history notes that Viking women often served as vulvas or seeresses, conducting rituals and divining the future, as described in sagas like Eirik's saga, where a vulva's prophecy shaped a community's path. You're watching her arrange stones in a circle, her staff carved with runes glinting in the firelight she's kindled. Her voice, low and rhythmic, calls to spirits, and you feel a chill, not just from the evening air but from the weight of her presence, as potent as the matriarchs in that political hall. You stand back, half expecting the ground to hum, your breath catching as you try to stay still. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some vulvas used henbane seeds in rituals, burning them to create visions, or maybe just a heady buzz, adding a hazy edge to their prophecies. Imagine you're near the fire, the acrid smoke tickling your nose, wondering if it's wisdom or just a wild trip. Historians still argue whether these women were revered spiritual leaders or marginalized as oddities. Were vulvas central to Viking religion, or were their roles exaggerated by later Christian scribes? The debate's open, but grave finds with staffs and ritual items, like those at Birka, suggest they held real sway, their visions guiding tribes as surely as a sunstone. You watch her chant, her hands tracing patterns in the air, as villagers gather, their faces taut with hope or fear. She's reading the future, maybe a voyage's success or a winter's hardship, like those you saw women endure. You recall the raven charms from the political talks, another nod to wisdom, like these henbane fumes, showing how women turned the strange into strength. A joke flickers. Why did the vulva burn henbane? To make Odin's Zoom call crystal clear. You smirk, but the truth is heavier. Her rituals were a lifeline, offering clarity in a world of storms and swords. The fire crackles, and you notice a young woman assisting, learning to scatter herbs, her eyes wide with awe, much like the girl with the rune stick in the saga circle. The vulva's staff taps the ground, each thud like the oars you heard on that longship, grounding the ritual in the same rhythm that carried Vikings across seas. Another quip: Viking seeresses didn't need crystal balls. They had better smoke and sharper instincts. But it's their authority that strikes you. Her words shape fates, as vital as the trade deals or raid plans you've seen, her chants weaving the unseen into the Viking world. As the ritual peaks, the vulva's voice softens, her prophecy delivered, and the crowd exhales, their trust in her as firm as in the shield maiden's shields. You feel the grove's stillness, the sea's murmur blending with her fading chant, and realize these women were bridges between earth and gods, past and future. Like the storytellers, the matriarchs, the navigators, they held their world together, their power as deep as the roots beneath your feet. You linger, the fire's glow fading, caught in the spell of their sacred strength. You're leaving the grove's mystic hush, the vulva's chant still echoing as you step onto a rocky shore where the sea's restless churn pulls you back to those longships you first saw, their dragon prows cutting through waves. The wind carries a salty sting, and you're squinting at a horizon that feels endless, where Viking women didn't just sail but sought new worlds. You're aboard a longship again, this time bound for uncharted lands, led by women whose courage matched the navigators you watched under starlight. The deck sways beneath you and you grip the rail, feeling the pulse of exploration, where every wave is a question and every landfall an answer. These women weren't just surviving, they were chasing the unknown. Mainstream history confirms that Viking women, like Gudrid Thorbjarnardóttir, sailed to places like Vinland, modern North America, centuries before Columbus, with saga accounts and archaeological sites like Lance aux Meadows proving their journeys. You're watching a woman, her cloak snapping in the wind, adjust the sail with a steady hand, her eyes scanning for signs of land, bird flights, wave patterns, just like the ravens you heard about in navigation tales. She's not just a sailor, she's an explorer, her resolve as firm as the matriarchs you saw shaping families or the vulvas weaving fates. You try to spot land too, but the sea's a gray blur and you're glad she's leading. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women carry dried seaweed as a lucky charm, believing it tied them to the sea's favor, like a Viking version of a rabbit's foot. Imagine you're holding a brittle strand, its salty crunch oddly grounding as you brace against the ship's roll. Historians still argue whether women led these exploratory voyages or were secondary to male captains. Were they the driving force behind new settlements, or did they follow men's ambitions? The debate's open, but sagas and finds like Gudrid's spindle whirl in Vinland suggest women were central, their skills shaping new frontiers. The ship surges forward and you watch the crew, men and women, work in sync, their oars dipping like the looms you saw in the village. The woman at the helm calls out, her voice cutting through the wind, pointing to a smudge of green on the horizon. You recall the henbane smoke from the vulva's ritual, another strange tool like this seaweed showing how women turn the odd into opportunity. A joke bubbles up. Why did the Viking woman sail to Vinland? To get away from her neighbor's bad mead. You smirk, but the truth is heavier. These voyages were gambles, risking everything for a new start, and women like her were the heart of it. You lean over the rail, the sea spraying your face as the crew prepares to land. The woman directs them to a shallow bay, her decisions as precise as the market women's trades or the shield maiden's strikes. Another quip: Viking women didn't need Google Maps, they had seaweed and stubbornness. But it's their vision that hits you. Each voyage was a leap, like the sagas that wove dreams into reality. You watch her test the shore's depth with a pole, her focus unshaken, and you feel the weight of her world, where exploration wasn't just adventure but legacy, building homes as enduring as the longhouses you warmed yourself in. As the ship nears land, you see her smile, faint but fierce, like the firelight in that storytelling circle. The crew cheers and you join in, your voice lost in the wind, feeling the thrill of discovery. These women didn't just sail, they claimed the horizon, their courage tying back to every skill you've seen, from shipbuilding to star reading. The shore looms closer and you're starting to grasp how their journeys reshaped the world, one bold step at a time. You're standing on the new shore, the crunch of pebbles under your boots mingling with the sea's soft sigh, a thread tying you back to the longships, raids and starlit voyages you've traveled. The woman who led you to this uncharted land is directing her crew to unload supplies, her voice steady as the matriarchs you saw in smoky longhouses. You're not just witnessing exploration now, you're reflecting on the legacy of Viking women, their mark etched in every wave they crossed, every market they mastered, every saga they spun. The wind carries the scent of pine and salt, and you feel the weight of their world, where women didn't just sail but shaped history's tides. This is their story's crescendo, and you're here to see how it echoes. Mainstream history confirms that Viking women's influence stretched far beyond their shores, with figures like Gudrid leaving traces in sagas and settlements from Iceland to Vinland, their roles as sailors, traders, and leaders reshaping medieval narratives. You're watching the woman, her cloak dusted with sand, mark out a spot for a new longhouse, her decisions as deliberate as the Volvish chants you heard in the grove. She's not just building a home, she's planting a legacy, her hands as sure as those that carved dragon prows or weighed silver in the market. You try to imagine her future, but the horizon's too vast, like the seas she conquered. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some women wore brooches shaped like tiny ships, a nod to their maritime prowess, pinned proudly to their cloaks. Imagine you're holding one, its metal cool and intricate, a miniature of the longship you sailed. Historians still argue whether women's contributions were the backbone of Viking expansion or overshadowed by men's deeds. Did they drive the Viking Age's reach, or were they vital but secondary? The debate's open, but artifacts like those ship brooches and saga accounts of women like Eud suggest their influence was as wide as the oceans they crossed. You wander the shore, watching the crew raise a tent, their movements echoing the shipyard's rhythm you saw long ago. A joke flickers. Why did Viking women wear ship brooches? To remind everyone they ruled the waves and the wardrobe. You grin, but the truth is heavier. Their legacy wasn't just in voyages but in the lives they built, from villages to Vinland. You recall the seal blubber bomb from Winter, another clever trick like these brooches showing how women wove practicality into power. Another quip: Viking women didn't need statues, their ships were their monuments. Their story feels alive, carved in every plank, every saga, every choice. As you linger, the woman kneels, tracing a rune in the sand, her face calm but fierce. You see her crew, women and men, working as one, their trust in her as deep as the faith in those raven charms or henbane visions. You're starting to feel their legacy not just in history books but in the air, the sea, the earth beneath you. They were navigators, warriors, traders, storytellers, seers, women who turned the raw chaos of their world into something enduring. The horizon glows and you sense their strength, a tide that still pulls at the edges of time. The light softens now, the sea's murmur growing quieter, like a lullaby settling over the shore. You feel your shoulders relax, the weight of their world easing as the waves lap gently, each one a whisper of their story. The sky stretches wide, stars peeking through, the same ones those navigators read, guiding you back to a calm, quiet place. Their legacy isn't loud, it's deep, like the roots of the pines behind you, steady and strong. You're sinking into the rhythm of the tide, the wind's soft hum, the warmth of a fire you imagine flickering nearby. Let the day slip away, like sand through your fingers, and rest in the glow of their courage. Their ships still sail in your dreams, carrying you to a place of peace. Sleep now, wrapped in their story, and let the sea sing you to rest.